Well, I guess now that I'm a non-stop YouTube video making machine, I have to keep up the audience engagement. Let's check those comments and see what people are saying. This again? This again? Listen, for years now, I've been listening to people say that you can put a saddle on a snake, but it's scientifically and demonstrably impossible, and it's time to prove it. Listen up, my dudes, because I'm about to science all over the place. Firstly, this is a snake. Note the rubbery complexion, the lack of shoulders or legs, the blank stare. This snake is not interested in your saddlery, your bits and your bridles. He's happy being a snake. Now, let's put a saddle on him anyway. Doesn't this look absolutely ridiculous? Note how the angry rope is unimpressed and uninspired by this fashion faux pas? And this saddle looks ridiculous. I mean, come on. But even fashion aside, look at how big the snake would have to be just to have a knight be able to sit on it. And that knight is wearing like 50 pounds of solid steel armor. If that snake turns or moves at all, the knight is falling off, that's for sure. That knight looks unimpressed, and so does the snake. Neither one of them wants this, because they both know it's ridiculous. Why? Because like I've been saying all along, there's no way to cinch a saddle around a murder spaghetti. Look at this. Note the measurements as made by this circa 1970s wooden ruler. Look at all the inches to spare. So many inches. That angry conda's just gonna wriggle right out of there. That's not enough? Well, maybe we need a little more science. Maybe we need a little subject matter expertise to settle this. I theoretically asked Danny Trejo, star of over 250 movies and television shows, owner and proprietor of numerous taco-themed restaurants, and obvious snake aficionado, if it was possible to put a snake and a saddle together. And you know what he said? No. He said no. Theoretically. Now, you want to theoretically tell Danny Trejo that he's theoretically wrong? Do you? Do you want to tell this guy he's wrong? No, you don't. In conclusion, in a game where people pretend to be wizards that shoot fire out of their hands while they fight ancient ghosts in a supernaturally cursed lighthouse, while still using the empowered treasures from a long-dead band of heroes to open glowing blue force fields erected by great soul-eating evil gods, putting a saddle on a snake is a bridge too far, and I won't have it. The science supports me because of the ruler. Look at the ruler. Science. Alright, you know what? Enough of that. On to the recap. Okay, here we go. The fourth floor and the end of book one. There's a lot of big revelations in this area, but the floor itself isn't as wildly varied as the third floor library was. Because of that, this should be a lot easier to run through, but there's still a lot to go through. I won't try to remember the sequence of events this time. Instead, I'm just going to cover the key plot points and then we can move on from there. Got it? Good, let's go. Alright, so the party entered through a set of stairs over here and encountered a dining hall. In this room, there were corpses of bodies strewn about. The dining table had been set as if a meal was taking place, and the corpses were set about in a way as to suggest that none of them had died violently, but that they did still die suddenly. Hopefully, given the presence of food and the unharmed bodies, you can put two and two together. They were poisoned. They died in such a way that they became corpse lights, which the party dispatched. Now, you'll notice there's a lot of doors coming out of the dining room, so let's go around them in order of importance. Here's one of the portal rooms. Here, there's a bathtub that just magically filled with water when Manny approached and touched the corpse inside. Now, I bet you're all vaguely remembering that and thinking, what was the point of that? And the answer is, there wasn't one. It was just there. Now here, there's a junk room. There was a poltergeist in this room who was stuck here throwing dishes at the party when they entered. There was a garbage sluice too, and if I recall correctly, there was talk of tying Tori's floating familiar to a rope and sending it down the sluice. At the other end was a garbage pile and an Odiug corpse. He hadn't eaten in a while, it seems. Those three rooms weren't important, but the next two were. Let's go to the kitchen. Here there was a chef who had unalived himself and written "never again" on the floor underneath him. There was a smokeless stove, which again seems important, but it really isn't. Maybe you could cook here if you wanted to. Anyway, to the north there was a secret cavern. It led up to this cave, and here there were a couple of those Scalathraxes. These were the same giant spiders that Belcorra had magically teleported to Otari immediately after the zombie attack. Further north, there was a torture chamber, and in it was a chain demon named Valgrist. She seemed almost depressed and invited you all to just leave her alone and exit the room. But because she had a token, she had to die, so you attacked. She was dispatched relatively easily, but more importantly, on the table there was a red ribbon whip. Olivier has been using that whip quite a bit since then, as it is especially effective against ghosts. The door out led to this big chamber here, and this is where things get a little weird. So weird that we're going to kind of skip this room and go over here to this area. There was a square hallway with Escherian Stairs all through it. You can go up here, down there, and yet somehow they were always flush or flat. It was some sort of odd magical effect. Now, there was some doors that led you to a central area. In here, there were 4 rooms in the cardinal positions. Each one of them seemed to show Belcorra in a different state in her life or performing a certain action like a haunted echo. In the northern room, it showed her meeting with Vagrant. In the eastern room, it showed her reading the Whispering Reeds. In the southern room, it showed her drinking a glass of wine and eating a human arm. Gross. And in the western room, it showed her leaving her room and entering through a portal. In this room, you were attacked by a void glutton, which proved to be a difficult but not impossible fight. Like a lot of monsters in this adventure, it's tricky to run because it has a backstory, but it also described the creature as attacking swiftly and having no interest in negotiation. I mean, short of it having some sort of ghost journal, it's tough to convey the message of what it knows or why it's here. So to the south of here, there was this stone bridge. That bridge led to a small campfire and a rough, shit-covered wild man named Jal Mesman and his pet wolf. The wolf didn't have a name, so we'll just call him Larry. Jal and Larry didn't know who Belcorra was, and frankly they didn't care, so you let them live. That's right, Jal and Larry had tokens, and they're still alive. I'm as shocked as you are. Now, off to the east, there's these tunnels. They lead to a very specific encounter that we do need to discuss, but I think it's best first to zoom over to another part of this floor. So remember when we said we were skipping this weird room? Well, let's talk about it. This room had a huge rock or altar in the middle of it that had 7 slashes on it. Those slashes were indicative of Nhimbaloth's fingers, as old Nimby is frequently shown to have 7 fingers. It radiated evilness, so hanging out here wasn't fun. It's almost as if somehow Nhimbaloth is a recurring theme in the Abomination vaults. To the south of this spot was a magical gate that you couldn't open or couldn't get around. So what's the deal? Well, eventually you'd realize that this altar up here to Nhimbaloth needed to have 4 items placed on it in order to open the gate. You needed the Cooperative Blade, Otari's Thieves' Tools, Zarmavian's Spellbook, and the Brooch. Now, how'd you learn all this? Well, down here, you met Otari Ilvashti's ghost. Remember how he's led you through the toilet hallways and how his spirit has shown you visions of the path he took? Well, everything led to here. Otari was all too willing to help because his ghost was trapped here. He offered up some of the information about how to get through the gate, and he told you about the 4 items that you'd need. In fact, he had 1 of them on him. But what about the rest? Well, Zarmavian's spellbook was still at odd stories back in Otari, so that was easier, and Olivier had a pretty good relationship with the owner, so that's easy. The Cooperative Blade? Well, it seems that the town blacksmith, Carmen Rajani, felt that he was owed the sword, so he had stolen it. And this path that we mentioned off to the side of Jal Mesman's camp, well, it leads you to a cave where Carmen was living. You got the blade off of him, and once he was defeated, he vowed to head to Absalom and not return to Otari. He wanted to reform his life and start over. Now, the last item was the brooch that was kept at Mayor Yosef Menem's home. It was easy enough to get, but there's an entire story there about the mayor's daughter being cursed in her sleep. I think that's probably better left for about 2 videos from now. So that's it, right? Well, not quite. There's 2 rooms left, and they're pretty important. Down here there was an office where you finally met Vagrant. Turns out the drow had become a worm that walks, an amalgamation of worms that had taken on a humanoid form. He professed his love for Belcorra and that he was going to see her plans through, and that means he's a bad guy, so you beat him up. Now, off to the side of his room, there was another room where Lazda Venkervale was being perpetually tortured. You rescued him and sent him home. And that's really it for the first 4 floors then, right? So what have we learned? Seems that there's an awful lot of worship to Nhimbaloth going on down here. There's been no specific signs of Belcorra, but you were all speculating by this point that she was still alive. There was a handful of creatures, mostly demons, who'd been compelled to stay here through contracts that they'd signed. And there were spirits like Otari Ilvashti who were stuck here and couldn't go to the afterlife. Valak Azrene himself had turned into a freakish abomination in his effort to serve his long-dead unrequited lover. Carmen Rajani had left Otari, and the mayor's daughter was going through some terrible tortures of her own. This is when the clock really started to tick though, because you knew that it was only a matter of time before the vault reactivated, the light on the top did something terrible, and worse yet, it seemed that there's a bit of a clock kind of hovering over the mayor's daughter's head. So you have to do something about all those things. So urgency was starting to push you forward, and for that reason, you went further down into the vault. Now I should note, this is also about where I stopped keeping really detailed notes, so the rest of these videos are gonna get wild. Lately I've been showing you guys some of the artwork that's part of the adventure path that I didn't necessarily show you while we were actually playing the game. This one's alright. It shows a zombie coming out of a sarcophagus and attacking a Pathfinder iconic character, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel very scary to me. I think we can do something to that zombie though to make it a truly terrifying experience. Oh yeah, that's much better. But I think we can make this even scarier. Perfect.